This is Patrick Moore with Ironclad Wealth Management here, and today I've got the next video in our series on how you can save taxes when you're getting ready to sell your business. And the strategy that we're going to discuss today is employee stock ownership plans, also known as ESOPs. So, ESOPs are one of my favorite strategies because my favorite strategies are ones that can achieve multiple objectives all at the same time. So this is a strategy that can benefit you, it can benefit your employees, and it can really turn your firm into something sustainable in the long run. So let's kind of dig in and see what we got going on. Now, first things first, this is once again general information. It's not something you can just kind of take, plug and play, and put into your own world. Now, having said that, I do hope that you learn from this, but I would recommend that you take it to your personal advisors to make sure that it makes sense to you. And if you want to reach out, you can always reach out to us. So, why would you consider an ESOP? Without knowing what it is, here's what it does: it really rewards your team. It puts them in a position to be in control of their own future. It preserves your business legacy. It means that you're not selling out to a private equity firm that might turn around and axe your best employee who's been with you for 10 or 20 years, who maybe just doesn't fit in with their culture. And then finally, the reason that we're here today is that it also helps you defer your capital gains taxes potentially indefinitely, which when you talk about combining that with one and two, it sounds pretty fun. So, what is an ESOP? In its simplest form, an ESOP is a retirement trust. Basically, think of it as a retirement plan. You've got your 401ks, you've got your pension plans, you've got your IRAs. And then right next to them is an employee stock ownership plan. We're going to call it an ESOP for the rest of this kind of video today. That plan is set up for the benefit of your employees. So each of them have like a sub account, just like they would in the 401k. They're going to have a certain number of shares in the trust, and the trust itself will purchase and own your business. So they're going to buy your business from you. Essentially, all of your employees will do it through this kind of intermediary, which is the ESOP. Now, who's going to run the business? Well, there's going to be a board of directors, and then the daily operations of the business are going to be just the same as it is now. It's going to be owned and operated. It's going to be operated and now owned by your executive team, your managers, your employees. So you get your exit, and your employees get to kind of benefit from the profits and value increase of the business moving into the future. So it's a really, really cool tool. Now, in parentheses, I've got this said that this is the simple version. And this is a simplification of how this works, but I think it's fairly straightforward. You, as the business owner, on the left of my beautiful graphic, I'm obviously an artist in a different light or in a different life. If you look at this, you are on the left. You sell your shares to the trust. The trust owns and operates the business, and the business then sends those profits back to the trust. The trust then uses those profits to pay off the loans, both from the bank and from you, to basically get that paid off. And then from the employee standpoint, they've each got those accounts. So if you were to sell your business for, say, $10 million, and the ESOP utilized $10 million of debt to do that, at the beginning, your employees' accounts would be worth zero. But as that loan starts to get paid down, their accounts grow and grow in value as profits accumulate. Now, what are the mechanics? Well, typically, the ESOP trust, one of the things that it can do is it can take a loan out that an employee may not otherwise be able to take out because there are specialized banks that lend to ESOPs. So if your business is worth $10 million, let's say they get a $5 million loan, they're going to send that to you, and then you're going to carry an installment note for the balance that will get paid off over time. So those employees will then receive shares based on how much they make, how many years of service and contribution eligibility into the plan they have. And then when they retire or leave the firm, if they're fully vested in their shares, which once again, it's vested, it's similar to your other retirement plans, the ESOP is required to pay and buy out those shares from the employees. So it's a really, really cool structure that can get complicated, but benefits all of the parties involved in the plan. Now, let's talk about the tax benefits of an ESOP because there's two distinct tax benefits depending on how you're set up. The first is what we'll call pass-through ESOPs, and I've got S corp in here as a holder, but it could also be an LLC. If an LLC owns or an S corp owns an ESOP, well, that pass-through income goes to the ESOP, which is a retirement trust. And retirement trusts are tax deferred. So they're not going to pay income taxes on any of the business profits until those employees cash in their shares, and then they'll owe taxes on the value of said shares. So that's benefit number one. However, what if you're a C Corp? If you're a C Corp, it's actually kind of like the flip side of the S Corp. C Corps have to pay corporate income taxes. Corporate income taxes are 21% at the federal level right now. So if the business is making $1 million, 21% is $210,000, they would have to pay that tax. However, once that C Corp pays the tax and sends the dividends to its owner, the ESOP is tax deferred. It's tax free. It's not going to pay taxes on those dividends. So there is still a substantial benefit there, but you do still have to pay that corporate income tax. The thing that differentiates the C Corp from the S Corp and maybe makes it more favorable to a seller is that if you utilize what's called a Section 1042 rollover, you can defer your capital gains on the sale, which is where this comes into play in our series on saving taxes. So it is a little bit of kind of like two sides of a coin. On one side, the seller gets benefits. On the other side, the business gets benefits. But you can structure these things in such a way that you get the best of both worlds. Now, you may have noticed, because I mentioned it, that you have to utilize a Section 1042 rollover to defer your capital gains. So what that means and how you do a Section 1042 rollover is you have to sell at least 30% of your business to the ESOP. If you do that, you've held your shares for greater than 3 years, and you reinvest in what's called qualified replacement property within 12 months of the sale of the business or 3 months before it, you can then defer your taxes indefinitely until your QRP is sold in the future or when you pass. If anybody has worked in real estate and heard of a 1031 exchange, you only get that deferral benefit if you reinvest in that other piece of property. This is similar in that way that if you don't reinvest that money in your QRP, which is very different than real estate, obviously, you will not get that benefit. So if we look at the diagram below here, I've got a $10 million sale, just kind of shown here once again with my great artwork. If you look at it on the left, the ESOP I'm saying has $6 million in cash, and they would have got that from a bank loan. So they have a bank loan, they got it for 60% of the value. That's on the high end of what I would say is possible. And then there's a $4 million installment note to the sellers. Well, the QRP, one of the rules is that to get the full deferral, the money has to be invested within 12 months. But you as the seller only have $6 million of cash, so where is that other 4 going to come from? Well, the answer is there are third parties, depending on what type of QRP that you buy, that will extend you the difference in the form of a margin loan. So you can defer that full amount. They usually use some hedging strategies to accomplish that. And then over the next 5-10 years, as the remainder of your installment note is paid off, you take that difference, pay down your margin loan, and you wind up with your $10 million in QRP, fully tax deferred. Now, what is QRP? There's a long list of items here. The upshot is that there's some exclusions. You can't invest in banks, mutual funds, certain securities issued by government agencies. It has to be an active business, and they define that as 50% of the assets used in the active trade or business. And there's some limitations on passive income, can't be more than 25% of the total receipts. And then it has to be common stock, preferred stock, bonds, etc. Now, the two most common that I see are people either use common stock, meaning your apples, etc., or they use floating rate notes, which are just bonds where the value of the bond is tied to an interest rate index and it floats up and down. Those are the two most common, and that's because those are the two most easily marginable securities, and it's the ones that people can kind of set up with a reasonable expectation of what will happen over the next 10 years. So to close that gap, you buy those two items, the full $10 million. You may need $4 million of margin, which I know is a scary word, but it's something where the risks can be mitigated by a professional third party manager. So you kind of have a choice of, okay, do I pay taxes on that remaining $4 million, or do I utilize a professional third party manager to get that done? And it's something that's actually a little bit more commonplace than you would think. So, having said all of that, what if you're an LLC or S Corp and you're like, well, crap, I kind of want to do this, but I'm not a C Corp? Well, you do have to be a C Corp to get to 1042, but you can convert your corporation to a C corporation as long as you then hold those shares for at least 3 years before the sale. If you do that, you are eligible for the 1042 rollover. Now, as an aside, you can get dinged with some taxes in the course of corporate reorganizations. So make sure that you work with competent legal counsel to get that done, because it is something you don't want to find out once you've already done it. Now, having said that, it is possible, it is doable. I just like to always give that notice. Now, the next thing to note is that if you make that change from an S Corp to a C Corp, you then can make the change back to an S Corp to get those tax-free benefits 5 years after you revoked that S Corp election. So if you're trying to get the best of both worlds here, what you could do is you could change from an S Corp to a C Corp, make the sale after 3 years, get those full tax deferral benefits, and then a couple of years later, change back to an S Corp. Because what will happen is then the business will be tax free, and they can probably use some of that tax money to accelerate paying down your loan. So you can do some pretty cool stuff here. Now, this is going to be fairly simple, but this is the business owner. This is our case study on what an ESOP could do if you utilize a Section 1042 rollover. So I've got Daniels Engineering. It's a Georgia-based engineering firm. They've got long-time managers. They know the business in and out. So first things first, sounds like a pretty good candidate for an ESOP. They're looking to sell. They think the valuation is about $10 million, and they'll have a taxable gain of $9.5 million. Well, if they don't use the ESOP structure, if they sell it, they would face taxes of about $2.7 million. That's on a C Corp. If they utilize the ESOP structure, use that 1042 rollover, you can see there's not much complicated math in the second column, because as long as they do that full reinvestment to QRP, they will defer their taxes indefinitely. So this is what we're talking about. This is why it's a strategy that can work not only for your employees in your business, it can work for you. So what are the drawbacks to consider? Because ESOPs are complicated. There's really no way around that. When you're talking about setting up a retirement trust, you have to do things in the benefit of the employees. They have to be put forward before anything else. It can get complicated. Well, the biggest piece of that in my mind are the administrative fees and the annual valuation. So there has to be an impartial trustee set up who manages the trust in the best interest of all of the employees. And as you can imagine, people who do that don't do it for free. So it is something where there is a payment associated with that. The second thing is there's an annual valuation. And the reason why there's one of these is it's not like you're a publicly traded company. Every employee has that little sub account I was talking about. And so what happens is they have that sub account, and then to get the actual increase in value that they get every year, there'll have to be a valuation done that measures how much they've paid down the debt. And then that's what the employee will see when they log in and look at their account or get their paper statement. Another thing that's a quirk, which I think is really interesting, is that an ESOP, because they're operating in the employee's best interest, not yours, is they are not legally required, and they cannot just get into a bidding war and match the highest offer for a company. What they do is they do a valuation when you're considering selling, and that valuation is the valuation. If it comes back at $10 million and a third party company comes in at 11, and that third party company makes that offer to you, they don't have like matching rights. The valuation came in at $10 million. That means the ESOP is going to pay $10 million. So that's just kind of some of the quirks there. And then another one of the drawbacks is, hey, you can't force an ESOP to happen. If you don't have a strong management team in place, it's probably just not going to work. So that's kind of what I think the drawbacks of an ESOP are. Now, having said that, who is it best for? Well, it's best for a few key considerations here. I think it's best for people with a strong management team. It's best for a team of at least 15 employees. And I think that's definitely on the small side. It probably needs to be a little bit larger. And the reason why those two things are key is in businesses smaller than that, the owner's probably making all the key critical decisions, and there's not much delegation going on. It has to be a business, and a business does not rely on just you, the owners. It has to be something where things can be delegated, things can be understood, and there's a continuation once that owner leaves. The next two items I think are probably, at least mathematically, the most important is that there has to be stable cash flow because the ESOP's taken out a loan. And if it's not stable, it's not going to be able to pay off that loan. And then secondly, you probably want at least $1 million in earnings because those administrative and valuation fees are high enough that those tax savings need to offset them. So I do think at least a substantial amount of earnings is advisable, although there's probably some discount players out there that I'm not aware of. It's something that I think you want to have a strong, stable earnings base. And then finally, if you're a business owner who's like, hey man, I'm done, I just got to get out of this, an ESOP's probably not best because typically as the terms of a kind of an ongoing employment agreement, in an ESOP, they're going to want you to work for 2 to 3 more years. So it's something that you definitely need to consider when you're looking at an ESOP. Now, having said that, if an ESOP sounds like it's right for you, what do you need to do to set one up? Well, first, what I would recommend is to review all the strategies. Like I said, in this series, we're looking at about 7, but you want to look at every strategy available, figure out which one's best first. Model those financials, really stress test it, and then if that's right, you need to engage what's called an ESOP advisor. I would think of them as like investment banks for ESOPs. They're very similar. They help you source the debt. They help you model everything. They are somebody who work on ESOPs 24/7. They're going to help you conduct what's called a feasibility study. In many cases, they'll help you with the valuation or put you in touch with the people who do the valuation. And then they're going to help you set that plan up with their legal team or with their counsel that they know and trust because it's a very specific type of lawyering that has to go on. Now, once all that's done, the ESOP's ready, it's funded, it's ready to go, you found your trustee, you execute the sale. Typically, because these things can be fairly complex, it does take like 6 to 12 months to get these done and across the finish line. But it is something you kind of pay a little bit for that complexity. But in the end, it can be well worth it. Now, how do we help? Well, just like I said a minute ago about looking at all of the various strategies, our job is to analyze the best fit from your perspective. It's to look at it, figure out what you need to do, and then put it in front of you and say, okay, hey, here's what you're trying to accomplish. Here's your 3 options. Which one works for you? If an ESOP is the right one for you, we're going to model those various scenarios. We're going to coordinate with that ESOP advisor, with that trustee, with the valuation firm to help you get you where you need to be. And then we'll also help you manage the QRP portfolio. And if the ESOP turns out 6 months in to not be right for you, it's going to suck because you might have paid 1 or 2 bills, but we'll help you support the pivot to another strategy because we're not ESOP advisors. We help monitor the ESOP advisors on your behalf. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, the earlier you start, the better. We offer a no cost, no obligation 15-minute phone call. You can follow the link here and just pop a time on our calendar. And if you're like, hey, Patrick, the ESOP doesn't interest me or I want to look at something else, like I said, this is a 9-part video series on how to save taxes on the sale of your business. And there's 6 other strategies in here that you can learn a little bit more about. So I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.